The first scream wasn't mine, but it could have worn my face. It sliced through the dusk like a busted bottle, rattling across the kitchen tile and into the nerves I'd been coiling tight for years. Porcelain burst against the wall, my throat truer than I'd ever let it be. After a lifetime of polite nods, long dinners, and those tired little phrases that keep a woman quiet. It was his plate. His, "You forgot the seasoning again, Nia" plate. Only this time, Darius didn't get the sentence out. The dish left my hand before he found his chair. He stood there blinking, not understanding. His mother, Ms. Loretta, who had wandered in uninvited like always, gasped like I'd grown horns right there in our black household, in a cul-de-sac that loved business as usual. My daughter's spoon clanged onto the table as she stared, brown eyes wide and wet. Then came the rarest sound of all, the kind of hush that settles after a blast. No speeches, no apologies, just the three of them finally looking at me and seeing more than the good wife, the ever-available mama, the peacemaker. They saw the woman who'd stopped swallowing it. I walked to the living room, slid open the side table drawer, and took out the envelope, the one with their names written in red months ago. I set it on the table like a centerpiece. "Dinner's served," I said, voice steady. "Bon appetit." And I walked out the front door. To explain how we arrived there, I have to start earlier, before the crack of porcelain became my anthem, before that envelope felt like salvation, before I remembered I had a name outside of Mama and Wifey. My name is Nia Carter, 36. Housewife by circumstance, not desire. My days looped through invisible labor. Laundry no one thanked me for, meals that got critiqued more than tasted, school runs noticed only if I was 5 minutes late. My husband Darius had once been tender. Somewhere between our second child and his third promotion, his gaze learned to light up for everything but me. His job, his mother, any glittering stress relief he could justify. Ms. Loretta practically moved in. She corrected how I folded shirts, how I cut fruit, how I breathed. She wore a fixed smile that felt like a dare. My daughter Zora, 11 going on judge and jury, learned to mimic her father's shrug. "Dad says you're always dramatic," she'd toss out, like drama wasn't just a label folks slap on a black woman to keep her small. Loneliness is loud when people treat your presence like plumbing, necessary, silent, taken for granted. Change began on a wet Tuesday in early spring. I went to the grocery store not because we needed anything, but because the checkout line was the only place nobody needed me. Miss Bernice, a soft-spoken sister in her 50s who rang me up most weeks, chatted with a man ahead of me. He was tall, clean in a simple way, the kind of presence that made a room feel less frantic. When he turned, he noticed my keys on the floor and handed them over, his fingertips brushing mine. He didn't linger. He just nodded, like acknowledgement itself was ordinary. That moment seeded something. And seeds, fed right, will split concrete. I started going to the store more. I began journaling, dredging up old spiral notebooks stuffed with poems I wrote before life tightened its belt around me. I signed up for therapy, told the house it was Pilates. The seeds sprouted slowly. I didn't become loud. Became clear. Clarity made me practical. I kept notes. Every cutting comment, every neglectful hour, every stray financial paper Darius left on the kitchen counter. I wasn't plotting revenge then. I was building a door. But then came the night that turned the door into a blueprint. I stood behind the garage door, a basket of clean clothes numb in my arms, listening to Darius chuckle into his phone, soft like he used to with me. He used that low, deliberate tone he hadn't spared for me since Zora was in diapers. "You wouldn't believe the things she fusses over," he murmured, "like cooking from scratch. I keep telling her to just buy the box." So my care got renamed pride. The meals I used to bind us became evidence of my stubbornness. I didn't cry. Something inside me crystallized, not into bitterness but into focus. Like watching a storm build and realizing the thunder was mine. From that night on I changed. Outwardly I was the same. Quiet, neat, dependable. Inside I gathered light the way kindling gathers flame. The first step was simple, watchfulness. I bought a prepaid phone and learned to be meticulous. I downloaded backup copies of his messages and call logs he left half hidden on the family laptop. Sloane, the name attached to the texts, wasn't a colleague. She was younger, eager, hungry, and completely unaware that the invisible wife wasn't a prop. I thought I wanted to expose him, but outrage burns fast. What I wanted was reclamation, the kind you build carefully enough that it can't be kicked down. So I studied the money. Darius never believed I could follow the numbers. He forgot who I was before I parked my dreams to run everyone else's. Getting back into our accounts felt like a pianist slipping onto an old bench, fingers remembering the music. A cancelled luxury membership here, a closed rainy day account there, a new savings route in a name I hadn't used since undergrad. I called Camila, a brilliant friend with a mind like a ledger and a spine like steel. She taught me where to look for what men like Darius think they hide. Bonuses masked as stipends, consulting checks, a side gig buried in a digital shoebox. At night, Darius would kiss my shoulder like we still fit. I didn't flinch. Let him believe the bomb was working. It made the work cleaner. Then I started leaving notes. Different handwriting. One tucked in his gym bag. Does she know? Another on his dashboard. You're being watched. I knew how paranoia braids itself. How it makes a man check locks twice and tilt his phone away from the person he swears he trusts. Next, I turned to Ms. Loretta. Control was her soft spot. I let little things slip. Moved her pill organizer one cubby over. Rearranged her closet by color instead of season. Swapped 2 vitamin labels the pharmacist would catch in a second. She whispered to Darius about her memory. He didn't believe it at first. Seeds don't sprout in front of you. They work underground. Zora was the hardest because she's my baby. She'd learned the disrespect she'd seen. So I taught her something else. Accountability, remembrance. I left my old journals on the coffee table. Polaroids of a girl on a beach, laughing with salt in her hair. Poems with ink smudged by joy. I caught Zora staring at a photo of me barefoot and shining. You used to be happy, she whispered. I still can be, I told her. We didn't dissect it. But the next time I asked her to stir the pot, she got up and stirred. The house changed, barely visibly. But the air grew heavier around the lies. They felt it, even if no one could name it yet. And that's when I did the most unexpected thing of all. I invited Sloane over. There's a way to set a snare that doesn't leave fingerprints. No rope, no spring, just courtesy and timing. I knew Sloane wouldn't expect anything from me. In her mind, I was the wife who smiled through storms and stacked the plates after. That's why it would work. I built a path she'd be eager to walk. From a quiet account with no ties to me, I sent a message as a local event curator in Harborview looking to feature micro-influencers for a styled shoot. The theme. Second acts. Rebranding after a life change. The rape. Reasonable, glossy enough to stroke ambition. I asked if she could come dressed in cream. She replied in 8 minutes, gratitude spilling through her words like she'd been waiting to be chosen. I booked a venue on the edge of town. A small glass pavilion tucked into a hill, sunlight ribboning across velvet chairs and a long mirrored console. It looked like a daydream. I arrived early in a fitted jumpsuit and a calm I had earned, set out a pot of real chamomile, and let the quiet do half the talking. Sloane parked and stepped out in a lace dress the color of milk. When she turned and saw me, her smile faltered. She thought about running, just for a second, then squared her shoulders the way young women do when they're not sure who's the threat. "Hi, Sloane," I said, keeping my voice soft. "No scene. No shouting. Come inside." We sat with the city humming faintly below us. "Porty." She watched my hands like they were a fuse. "He told you I was broken, didn't he?" "Yes. Fragile. Moody. Maybe unstable." She swallowed. "He said you were struggling." "Of course he did." I slid a linen envelope across the table. "Here's the truth he didn't post." Inside, a tidy ledger of dates and hotel receipts. Duplicate love notes he'd copy-pasted to save time. Rideshare logs. A screenshot where he called her his pressure valve and me background noise. I didn't speak while she read. Her mouth tightened, the way a wound closes when it realizes air is dangerous. "I'm not here to punish you," I said. "He sets women up like chess. You're not the enemy, just a piece he moves when the board gets crowded. Leave while your name still belongs to you." Her eyes glossed, but the tear didn't fall. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I've already stopped helping him." I left her with the envelope and the quiet. I didn't ask for a promise. I didn't need a declaration. Sometimes the only sermon that lands is proof. By the time I drove back through Crescent Heights, the sun was lowering into gold and everything in our cul-de-sac looked too neat, too trimmed, like a smile held too long. Darius was pacing the living room, jaw clenched, phone face down on the table. "Where were you?" he demanded. "Planning," I said, slipping my keys into the bowl. "You should check your messages." He snatched the phone. As the screen lit, his color drained. Ping, receipts. Ping, screenshots. Ping, an email from his assistant linking the company conduct policy with 3 highlights. Ping, something forwarded from an unknown number that was not, in fact, unknown to him. I took the stairs without hurry and on the quilted bedspread, set a letter in my own hand. This is not collapse. This is clarity. Dinner's on the table for now. Truth doesn't land like thunder. It echoes. It crept through our house, testing beams, rattling picture frames that had smiled down on a lie. That night the phone buzzed until morning. Sloan sent one last message, a forwarded thread where he referred to her as backup. Then she went silent. HR at his firm started asking quick questions. His 2 favorite committee chairs suddenly had conflicts and postponed meetings. Reputation doesn't crumble. It erodes grain by grain once the water finds a seam. Around noon the next day, he cornered me in the kitchen. The kettle hissed. Lemon peel perfumed the air. "Did you send it?" he asked, voice lower than usual. I portioned honey into my mug. "I gave people what they were owed. You could ruin me." I sipped. "You were doing fine on your own." He had no script for my calm. He'd spent years training for my tears, my pleading, my apology loops. He hadn't practiced for a woman who wouldn't perform. That evening, Ms. Loretta swept in like a siren after a storm, shoes clicking, purse swinging. "Nia, what mess have you made of this family?" I closed my journal and met her gaze. "I told the truth." "You always were dramatic," she snapped. "If Darius had set firmer rules, we wouldn't be here. If you tended your own life half as hard as you tended ours," I said evenly, "he might not need so many lies." She froze, knuckles white against her handbag. Darius appeared behind her, voice thin. "Ma, it's best you go." The shock on her face looked like a mirror that refused to flatter. She left without another word, the door's soft click landing like a stamp on a chapter one would not reopen. Later I found Zora on the stairs with an old album in her lap, the one with photos of me at 19 on Lake Meridian's shore, legs sandy, smile wide, arms thrown around a future I hadn't yet traded away. "Were you always this sad?" she asked, eyes shining. "No," I said, sitting beside her. "I was always this quiet. People mistake quiet for weak." She leaned into me. We turned the pages slowly, letting a past self bless the current one. The days that followed felt like air after a storm, strangely clean, heavy with what's been knocked loose. Darius tried a new version of helpful, the way a man tries on a coat he never thought he'd wear. He made breakfast once. The pancakes came out black-rimmed and the kids laughed. I didn't. Not out of spite, out of understanding. This wasn't his redemption story. It was my reclamation. The real pivot came across a polished table in Camila's office, signatures waiting like open doors. "It's time," she said. "File and write the next part your way." The pen felt heavier than it was. Blick, scratch, With each stroke, I stepped further into myself. Darius stayed downstairs that night, whispering into his phone, trying to stitch a sail onto a boat that had already found shore without him. The trap wasn't a trap at all. It was a boundary, and I had finally honored it. The next morning he tried again. "We need to talk," he said, standing in the doorway like a question mark. We will, I replied, sliding on my blazer. At noon. With counsel. You remember Camila? You thought she was helping me with a business idea. He blinked. You can't just ambush me. I smiled, soft and exact. The ambush was last night's meal. This is accountability. Gloria's exit, the doors click, her perfume lingering, marked the beginning of quiet I could live inside. The house no longer echoed with accusations. It pulsed with recalibration. Zora stayed near me more often now, hovering like she was relearning my gravity. She didn't apologize aloud, but the way she looked at me said she understood more than words could hold. Darius, meanwhile, moved like a man carrying ghosts in his pockets. Every step hesitant, every phone call taken behind closed doors. His confidence had cracked, leaking slowly across his days. I didn't gloat. Victory wasn't the point. Peace was. The divorce hearings came faster than expected. Camila, ever sharp and composed, guided me through it like a captain steering a ship through fog. She'd collected everything. Screenshots, accounts, my journals, witness statements from neighbors who'd heard the shouting and seen the visiting cars. It wasn't revenge. It was record-keeping, clarity turned legal. The judge's decision landed like punctuation. Firm, inevitable. Primary custody of Zora. Ownership of the house. Financial compensation for years spent invisible. I didn't cry, not even smile. Just breathed fully for the first time in years. When the gavel fell, Darius stared straight ahead, eyes unfocused. He looked smaller, as if the suit that once announced authority now simply hung on a man unsure of where to stand. That evening I made tea again, lemon peel and honey. Steam curled upward, soft and forgiving. Zora joined me in the garden, the same yard that once felt like a cage. What happens now? She asked. Now, I said, we plant new things. We did. Tomatoes, mint, and basil first. Our fingers sank into the earth. Our laughter replaced years of brittle silence. The soil didn't judge the past. It just accepted what was given and promised growth in return. Days turned into a rhythm of rediscovery. I started working freelance again, designing interiors for local spaces, blending color and light the way I once blended patience and endurance. Each project stitched me back together. Every client who said, "You've got an eye for peace," reminded me that I did. Months later I got a letter, handwritten, no return address. It was from Sloane. He thanked me. Said she'd left Darius soon after our meeting, that she was in therapy, that she'd started painting again. Her final line read, "You showed me how to walk away without hating myself." I burned the letter, not from spite but for closure. Some truths don't need keeping, they need release. As the paper curled into ash, I whispered to the woman I'd once been, "You made it out." The night wind carried the smoke upward, soft and golden. And for the first time in a long time I realized, I wasn't rebuilding from ruins. I was finally building from choice. Morning sunlight spilled through the kitchen blinds, scattering across the countertop like confetti from a life newly claimed. For the first time in years, the air didn't feel heavy with tension. It was calm, almost musical. Darius still lived in the guest house at the edge of the property until the sale of his new place finalized. He moved quietly now, careful not to disturb the peace he'd once shredded. Occasionally, I'd catch him watching Zora and me from the patio. His eyes hollow but resigned. It wasn't pity I felt, just distance. The kind that grows naturally when truth finally clears the fog. Zora was blooming. Her laughter filled the rooms, her sass softened into curiosity. She no longer parroted her father's cynicism. Instead, she asked questions about everything. "Mom, how did you know when to stop pretending?" I thought for a while, stirring the soup on the stove. "When pretending started hurting more than silence," I answered. I began reconnecting with myself in small ways, ways I didn't realize I'd missed. I painted my nails a deep burgundy again, wore the earrings I'd tucked away because he said they were too loud. I bought a record player and filled the house with Etta James and Jill Scott, music that breathed warmth into the walls. Camila visited one afternoon, bringing folders and laughter in equal measure. "So," she said, sipping wine, "how does freedom taste?" "Like lemon tea," I smiled. "Sharp at first, then sweet." We laughed, but behind that laughter was gratitude, the quiet kind that doesn't need applause. Later that week I joined a small community circle Bernice had invited me to, women from every walk of life, each with her own story of breaking free, starting over, or finally saying no. We met at a cozy cafe downtown called The Haven, all brick walls and yellow lights. It wasn't therapy. It was communion. We talked about the invisible work of women, the art of boundary setting, and the courage it takes to stop shrinking. Every meeting stitched another layer of confidence back into me. Then came an unexpected call from a design firm in Atlanta. They'd seen photos of my recent interior projects online and wanted me to collaborate on a boutique redesign. Remote at first, with the option to expand. My heart fluttered, not from fear but recognition. The version of me who once believed her life was too small had been wrong. When I told Zora, she hugged me so tightly it hurt. "Does that mean we might travel?" she asked. "Maybe one day," I said, smiling. "But for now we grow right here." We spent that evening planting marigolds by the porch. Zora painted the flower pots with bright colors, orange, turquoise, gold. I let her make a mess, the kind that meant joy. As twilight deepened, I looked at her, cheeks dusted with dirt, eyes glowing with the same light I'd once buried. 6 months later, the house on Magnolia Avenue didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt lived in. Every corner told a story of renewal. Fresh paint, new curtains, a bookshelf filled with novels I once swore I'd never have time to read. Even the silence had changed. It was no longer the tense kind that listened for footsteps or arguments. It was soft, sacred, a silence that hummed with peace. Zora thrived. She joined her school's creative writing club, something she once mocked me for enjoying. Some evenings, she'd sit across from me at the kitchen table, scribbling stories while I drafted design mock-ups for clients. We'd share music, snacks, laughter, the kind of small, ordinary magic that used to feel impossible. One Sunday morning, while cleaning out old boxes in the attic, I found a faded journal with my maiden initials. NM inside were pages filled with dreams I'd written at 23. Start a business. Travel alone. Publish a book of poems. I sat cross-legged on the floor, smiling. Back then, I thought all those dreams were lost in the debris of duty. But maybe they'd just been waiting for me to remember them. That week, I launched a small online design studio called House of Nia, a space where interior design met emotional renewal. My tagline, rebuilding from the inside out. Clients began to find me, mostly women looking to turn old spaces into sanctuaries. It wasn't just about paint and furniture, it was about reclaiming peace. Every project became a mirror of my own journey. Darius sent an email a few months later. Polite one. No apologies. Just an update that he'd moved to Charlotte, started therapy, and wanted to visit Zora during the summer. I read it twice, not to feel anything, but to be sure I didn't. I replied briefly, kindly. Boundaries can coexist with grace. One evening, as the last light poured through the window, Camila stopped by with takeout. "You know," she said, setting down the food, "you could write about all this one day." Smiled. "I already did," I said, nodding toward my open journal on the counter. "Just not for the world yet." After she left, I stepped out to the porch. The marigolds and basil swayed gently in the wind, the air carrying the scent of growth and lemon tea. The neighborhood kids laughed somewhere down the street. A distant train moaned. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. No guilt, no fear, no waiting for permission. The woman I used to be, the one who whispered apologies into empty rooms, had turned her silence into strength. I wasn't Mrs. Carter anymore. I wasn't the footnote in someone else's story. I was Nia Monroe, the woman who took the shards of her life, shaped them into art, and built a home out of her own freedom. And as the evening deepened around me, I whispered to the sky, steady, certain, whole. This is what peace feels like.